Fra Angelico was born as Guido di Pietro, 1395, and he lived all the way February 18, 1455. In many ways, if you're just looking at art history, Fra Angelico, which just means the angelic brother that he gets nicknamed, he bridges two of the most important schools of history in Christian art. He very much is grounded in the medieval High Gothic that we associate with Gothic cathedrals and other paintings like this, but also lives into and as a starter of the Renaissance. So in many ways, he is the best of both worlds when it comes to much of Western Christian art. The symbolic ideals of the High Middle Ages and the Gothic are all throughout his paintings, so that you'll get people, saints standing on clouds, or you'll have very distinct gold gold halos. But you'll also get the realism that the Renaissance begins to show. Three-dimensional figures that their clothes actually hang off their bodies in a realistic way, for instance. And so in that way, just when it comes to his painting, Fra Angelico begins to show two of the best worlds and impulses in Christian art, both of showing the high calling of heaven and the beauty that emits from the realm of God's heavenly throne, but also the fact that this real world that we're a part of demonstrates God's beauty as well, the beauty of the human form, the beauty of nature. And in Fra Angelico, both find a home so that you can say that his art in many ways is reflective of the incarnation of Jesus Christ, both human and divine, in an intricate unity that does not oppose each other, and in fact brings out the beauty of both by being juxtaposed. What you probably know Fra Angelico from is he did many, and by many I mean revisited multiple times, significant scenes in the life of Christ. Probably most famous among them is the Annunciation and the Last Judgment. You have undoubtedly seen Annunciations by Fra Angelico. They're some of the most famous scenes of the Annunciation in Western art. And each time he does something a little bit different. So he doesn't, so to speak, make multiple copies of the same scene. Sometimes there's a regalness about the Virgin Mary. She's set enthroned or she's sitting in a chair. Other times she's standing or even kneeling and looks more vulnerable. He painted many different types of paintings. So sometimes he's painting for rich commissions in private chapels of families even like the Medicis, very powerful families. But then also he paints just reflective paintings and murals, frescoes, inside of the cells of his brother friars. And you can see that there he's really approaching a much more contemplative, soft features. The colors are very muted in those chapels as opposed to the private chapels where everything is blue and gold and very vibrant. Among his peers, he starts to really not embellish, imbibe, demonstrate what people associate with the Dominican order. I'm guessing that if you hear someone called the angelic brother, you also probably call to mind the angelic doctor, Thomas Aquinas, the great Dominican saint and thinker, whose willingness to pay attention to the incarnation and what that means for the bodily, lived-out life of the human by utilizing Aristotle, St. Augustine, and things like this, was a marker in medieval theology. In many ways, Fra Angelico is seen as the artistic embodiment of that sort of idea, and that we see these in his paintings, both the high altars in places like the Vatican, but also in the cells of an initial brother friar in the Dominican order. This is demonstrated in his life. Multiple times it is said that he was asked to be an archbishop or to actually take higher orders. I think some people wanted him to be a priest, for instance. But his entire life he stayed as what you would, I guess, say an entry-level Dominican. He was just a friar who was embedded in the spirituality of Dominican mysticism. He was always attentive at Mass, the Dominican office. But his main emphasis was that you can't really demonstrate this lived-out life of the God-man unless you're close to him. The famous phrase he has is, "He who illustrates the acts of Christ should be with Christ." And so people in his own time noticed the sort of warmth and the brilliance simultaneously of his paintings. Usually people err one way or the other. And the idea was that the reason Fra Angelico could do this was because of how close he was with Christ in prayer, in life, in his service to the poor, in his mortifications, in his lived out life. So his everyday life, the small things that he would do as a Dominican friar, were demonstrated in these magnificent ways in works of art that still are considered some of the best there are today, and in methodology that reverberates throughout the artistic world. The artistic line of Fra Angelico eventually leads to Michelangelo, because his apprentice and the apprentice of his apprentice, as we say, goes down that Michelangelo falls in the line of Fra Angelico. And I think you can begin to see that even the great works of the later Renaissance are impressed and stamped with this attention to the interaction of the divine and the human that is demonstrated through the life and spirituality of Fra Angelico. Well, if you look at Fra Angelico's life and then abstract it to ours, it was said that Fra Angelico would never paint without having fervent prayer before, during, and after the painting. So it wasn't just a sort of technique that he had. Certainly he was a technical master, but every little thing he did was imbued with prayer, so much so that his works of art became a sort of permanent prayer, so he could walk away from his painting but still be praying. In a way, his paintings still, as it were, pray today. They say that he was so moved in actually representing Christ's life, that he would make a crucifixion, and every time he did, he would be in tears. Or that every time he would make a Last Judgment, another one of his favorite scenes to depict, that he would tremble at imagining the terror, but also the wonder of Christ in his splendorous Last Judgment. So when we think about our own work today, we're all tasked with many things, and I know for myself, I can hardly draw a stick figure well, so I'm not going to be giving Fra Angelico a run for his money in the artistic realm anytime soon. But no matter what it is that I do, I can imbue that with fervent prayer. Can I pray beforehand and beforehand consecrate my work to the Lord while I'm doing my work? Can I be utilizing my work as a prayer to God? And after I'm done, can I offer it up to Him as a small offering to show just the beginning, the amount of gratitude for the great blessings He's shown me in the talents that I have, but also in this wonderful world where truly the divine and the human meet together.